Hi guys, welcome back to Saving Salvage, and in today's video we are not going to be on the A3, we are going to start stripping down the engine on my RS4. I wasn't actually going to film this, but a lot of people do jump in the comments and just ask for updates on the RS4, so I thought it'd be easier just to do a video on what we're going to be doing to it, or sorry, what I'm going to be doing to it. So in the last update on the RS4, I said I took it to an engine specialist for them to have a look at. But if I'm honest, I don't think they wanted the job. They said, yes, we can do it, but they said taking the crank out was going to be like 2-3 days of the work, and loads of other stuff they said. And I was like, well, definitely doesn't take 2 or 3 days to take the crank out. I mean, I've already done half of it. I've already got half the crank exposed. It's just a case of taking the heads off, timing chain cover off, timing chains off, and take the crank out. It's literally probably 4 or 5 hours work. So straight away I was like, I'm not sure if I want you to rebuild my engine if you don't even know how long it takes to take a crank out. So I was like, nah, you know what, I'll come get it. I'll come get it, because they said, look, it's going to be £4,500 to rebuild it. I was like, no, it's not. So I was like, no, I'll come and get it. I'll just do it myself. Bloody hell, if no one else can do it, I'll do it myself. So that is where we're at. I went and picked the engine back up. I've got it here, and also I put on my Instagram, made a little bench. So I found a little abandoned bench, and I've tightened up a little bit, painted it, put a new slab of wood on the top, and that is going to be my surface. So what we're going to do in today's episode, guys, is we are going to take the heads off, and basically, well, we're just going to strip the engine down, and we're going to line everything up on the bench, and then we're going to have a look into whether this engine can be rebuilt. And if it can, I'll rebuild it, and if it can't, I'll buy a new engine. As simple as that. So obviously this time, I'm not going to be changing conrods and pistons on an engine stand swinging. I'm going to take everything apart properly, and I'm going to make sure it's all properly cleaned out. I'm going to send the possibly get a new crank, a second-hand crank, and basically just do everything properly like I should have done really in the first place. So if you do like these types of videos, guys, please do like and subscribe, and if you hadn't already, please head over to my Instagram, which is saving_salvage, and let's crack on with today's video. Start stripping the lump. So as I mentioned, it was going to take, I don't know how many hours it's going to take the crank out, so there's probably going to be quite a bit of time lapse. I will try and cut in important moments just to show you guys what I'm doing. But so just to show where we're at the minute, the engine is currently in this state, which is the sump's off, the second sump is off, and basically the crank is exposed at the bottom at the moment, so we could see the damage. And I took off piston number 5 cap, conrod cap, just to see the damage that was there, and that is all I've done. So none of the top end's been touched at all. So what we're going to be doing in today's video is obviously starting to strip down to get the crank out, which means rocker covers off, timing covers off, oil filter housing off as well, and then we need to take off this big timing chain cover, which will then give us access to the timing chains, which then we need to remove to be able to then get obviously the heads off as well, and then we'll be able to then split apart the engine again, and then that will expose our crank, which we can then remove. So just a quick update on what I've done so far. Rocker covers have both been removed. I had to jack the engine up in the air because I needed to get the camshafts in top dead center, so I was able to get access to remove the head bolts without having to take all the cams out again, because you can actually leave the camshafts in the carrier as long as you're in TDC, which I am now. So because obviously I took the caps off piston 5 and 2, I think, when I was spinning the engine over it, they kind of got jammed in themselves, so I had to lift the engine back up the air, push the pistons back onto the crankshaft, and then turn the engine over into TDC, and I have now locked both heads into TDC and also the crank as well. So we're all locked into TDC, which means I can take my heads off without having to disturb the camshafts. And I've also taken the rear timing chain covers off, and as you can see, removed the VVT units and the cam chains from the head. So now I will be removing, I've got to remove the high pressure fuel pump, off both sides, inlet manifold track, intake flat motors, and then I can undo the head bolts and then take the heads off, hopefully half an hour, 45 minutes. If I've done everything correctly, this should just pull off with no issues whatsoever. Sake. So now, as you can see, we have got everything off. I've got all the electrics off. I've got all the rest of the parts off, basically. So now it's just the block and obviously the timing chain. So the next thing we've got to do now is take the rear timing chain cover off. Then once we've got that off, then we can separate the crank sump again. And then that's when we'll be able to get the crank out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip it up onto its head, so to speak. So the weight is off the bottom of the timing chain cover here, and then we can undo the top bolts, and then hopefully that should just prise off, and then we can see the timing chain for the first time, and we will need to take it off. So timing chain cover off. I should have probably paused a minute ago and showed you the full timing chain. I have just taken one chain off there, look, which literally just went around the crank here, and it just went round that gear here, look. So it just did that, and then we went around that spur there. So that chain was there, but that is the, let's get out the light, look, that is the extent of the workings, the gubbins of the V8. So what we've got to do is we've got to remove this main timing chain here, because it obviously goes around the crank, and then what we'll do is I'll have to probably check ELSA at this point, because I don't want to remove things unnecessarily. But if you see that line here, see that there, that is what we have to remove, and you can see the long bolts there, look, that's what we've got to remove to get the crank out. So we've got to get that casing off there. So we'll have to remove a few more bits. As you can see, that the line goes all the way here. So we've just got to remove enough along this line to be able to get the crank casing off, and then the crank will come out. But I have a home to go to, so I'm going to check back in with you possibly tomorrow, but for you, 2 seconds. Take this out, slide her out. There we go. One exposed crank. I think this is still going to be really heavy. Yeah, it's going to be too heavy for me to lift up there on my own. I reckon that's still a good 80 kilos, I reckon. Right, so I've just got my dad to help lift it onto the bench. So there we go. We've exposed that crank, we've taken off the casing, which is I've just put down there for the moment, and here we are. So I've now just got to remove all my piston conrod caps, push the pistons out through the bottom, we'll get all the pistons back out again, and then we'll be able to just lift our crank off. But the scoring isn't actually that bad. I think some of it is some like shrapnel just melted onto it, so I don't think it's, yeah, I think it has scratched the crankshaft, but nowhere near as bad as I thought, and nowhere near as bad as the machine shop was saying. I mean, I think they were just idiots, if I'm honest. They said it would take 2 days to take the crank out. I've done it in 2 hours, so I think we can disregard their opinion straight away. But anyway, I'll take these caps off, push the pistons out, and then we should just be able to pop the crankshaft off, and then we can go from there and we'll see what we're going to do next. So here we have, oh by the way, I have the crank out. I've got it here. Here's the worst bit of damage. I don't know, best to put the light on it so you can see it. There, look. So it doesn't look too bad, but if I'm honest, I don't know what too bad looks like. It just looks like you can see some shrapnel down there, look, some burr, but there you go, look. So I don't know, anyone expert in this, can that be reground, or is it just best off getting a second-hand crank? But there we go, look, that's the worst of it. Just goes around there as well, look. But that is the worst of the damage. On the block, doesn't seem to be any damage. You can see, let's get my torch. So you can see obviously we've got our oil jets here, look, that sprays the underside of the pistons, and it is slightly bent on this one. It looks like something's fallen on it. There, right by the S, if it focuses. It's just pushed in a little bit, so I'm unsure what's happened there. And also you can see here, there's just some, there, look, there's just some slight marks on the thrush washer. So I'm not too sure, that side's fine, look. So I'm not too sure why it's like that, but it is. But I've had a quick look at the other washers are fine, and I've had a look at the block. That looks fine, there's no damage. So I've just put the crankcase on the floor. So here's the underside of our block. Nothing really to see here, to be fair. Nothing looks, apart from that oil jet that's slightly bent, nothing looks untoward. Better look at that bit of damage, look, on the cylinder wall. I think that's fine, that looks fairly minor to me, and as you can see the piston treble goes nowhere near it. It's not cracked or anything like that, so I think that's fine. But doesn't seem to be any damage on the block here, but obviously we're now at a stage where everything's stripped down and it needs to now get sent off to be tested. So need a bit of help. Is there anyone local to sort of the Cambridgeshire area that you recommend to get the crank tested, balance tested, to see if it can be machined, to get the heads tested, pressure tested, valves and everything checked, and to also get the block crack tested and everything like that? Does anyone know anywhere in or around the Cambridgeshire area that will be able to do that for me? I don't really want to travel 2-3 hours to drop off a block and stuff like that, so I'd rather just keep it local. So if anyone knows anywhere local to this area, please do let me know. So that is the next stage. We do need to send everything off to be fully tested, and for them to tell me whether it's all fine and can be rebuilt, or whether no, there's some issues, I wouldn't advise rebuilding it. And then once we know that, we'll go down the route of sourcing a second-hand engine, or sourcing bearings, pistons, whatever it needs to go back together. Obviously we need to work out whatever is cost effective. If it is going to cost £3,500–4,000 to rebuild this engine, it's not worth it. I'll go and buy a second-hand engine, and then I'll be able to sell these parts here, the good parts, for spares. So we need to work out the best course of action. So as always guys, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I shall see you very soon with some good news about the engine, and also next video on the A3, which I haven't touched yet. So as always guys, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers guys.